The wind cutting through Willowridge that morning carried the scent of rain and something else, something heavier, a thick, unspoken anticipation. Outside the sheriff's office, townsfolk had gathered in small, murmuring clusters. Their voices were low, but the excitement was palpable. Everyone had heard the rumor, the whisper spreading like wildfire through the quiet streets. She was back. Detective Avery Cole hadn't set foot in Willowridge in nearly 6 years, not since the Peterson case. Back then, she was the department's rising star, the one everyone talked about, the one who was going places, until the day she just wasn't. She'd packed her bags, left her badge right there on Sheriff Miller's desk, and vanished into the city. Gone. No goodbyes, no explanations, just silence. Of course, the town filled in the blanks. Some said she'd finally had enough of the quiet, insidious corruption that festered just beneath the surface of their picture-perfect town. Others whispered she'd gotten too close to the wrong people, poked her nose where it didn't belong, and was forced out for her own good. Whatever the reason, she was gone. Until now. Now she was back, and the reason had a name. Jonah Blake. Sheriff Miller watched from his office window, his reflection a grim mask on the glass. A dark, imposing sedan rolled to a stop right in front of the station. He felt his jaw tighten, a muscle twitching in his cheek. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, his voice a low growl. He pushed himself up from his worn leather chair, the springs groaning in protest. The sedan's driver's side door swung open. A figure emerged. Detective Avery Cole. Her trench coat was slightly damp from the morning drizzle, her expression as unreadable as a sealed letter. Her hair, once cut short, was now pulled back, but her eyes were the same, sharp, piercing, and constantly searching. They scanned the familiar street with a look that was part recognition, part pure contempt. "Morning, Sheriff," she said, her voice calm but clipped, each word a carefully aimed dart. Miller's frown deepened, carving new lines into his weathered face. "Didn't think the state would send you," he grumbled. "Neither did I," Avery replied, an illusion of her younger self still in the sheriff's mind. The Iron Lady was back, and she didn't look like she'd softened a bit. "Guess I just have a knack for unfinished business," she said. The moment she stepped inside the station, the air grew thick, charged with tension. Deputies, who had been lazily sipping coffee and shuffling papers, suddenly became very interested in their desks, pretending not to stare, yet their eyes followed her every move. Avery ignored them. Her gaze locked onto the caseboard in the back corner of the room. Jonah Blake's smiling, handsome face was pinned next to a grim, grainy photo of the river where his body had been found. She approached it slowly, like a predator sizing up its prey. Her eyes traced every line, every note, every piece of string connecting the sparse evidence. She absorbed it all in a heavy silence. "This all you've got so far?" she finally asked, her voice quiet but carrying across the hushed room. Miller crossed his arms, a defensive posture. "It was an accident. The boy fell into the creek, hit his head on the rocks. Tragic, but simple." Avery didn't even bother to look at him. Her eyes were still glued to the board. "You don't believe that?" "I believe what the evidence says," Miller shot back, his voice tight. Finally, she turned, her sharp gaze pinning him in place. She locked eyes with him, and for a moment, the 6 years since she'd left melted away. "Then maybe," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "you're not looking hard enough." Later that evening, as the drizzle turned into a steady downpour, Avery drove her sedan to the Blake's house. The residence stood like a monument to small-town respectability. A perfect white picket fence, grass so green and perfectly cut it looked like a carpet, and a welcoming porch light that never seemed to go out. It was the kind of house that screamed nothing to see here. Councilman Richard Blake opened the door before she could even knock a second time, his movements stiff and practiced. "Detective Cole," he greeted her, his tone formal, almost cold. "I didn't expect to see you here. I just have a few questions," she said, her voice steady and professional. "About Jonah." A woman appeared behind him, her figure framed in the warm light of the hallway. Eleanor Blake. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, but they were dry. She looked like a woman who had already done all her crying, locked away in private where no one could see the cracks in her perfect facade. "Please," she said softly, her voice barely audible. "Come in." The inside of the house was a shrine to their son. The walls were lined with photographs, a curated history of a golden life. Jonah at baseball games, hitting a home run. Jonah at church, looking angelic in a choir robe. Jonah at award ceremonies, his arm draped around his proud father, his smile a blinding beacon of success. The golden boy of Willowridge. Perfect smile, perfect grades, perfect life. But Avery had seen that look 1,000 times. Perfect usually meant pretend. Perfect was just another word for a very good lie. She spent an hour asking polite questions and receiving equally polite, empty answers. Condolences were offered, memories were shared, but it all felt rehearsed, hollow. As she finally stood to leave, Avery paused at the door, her hand on the knob. She turned back, her voice low, almost intimate. "Mrs. Blake." Was Jonah acting differently before the accident? Anything at all unusual? Eleanor hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second, something flickered in her eyes. A spark. Fear. Guilt. It was there, and then it was gone, extinguished as quickly as it appeared. She shook her head, her composure perfectly restored. No, nothing unusual. He was just our Jonah. Avery managed a faint knowing smile. All right, thank you for your time. She stepped back out into the rain, pulling her coat tighter against the biting chill. It wasn't just the weather that was cold. She could feel the eyes of the whole town on her, watching her return. A town torn in two. Half of them were hoping she'd finally uncover the truth. Whatever it was, the other half was terrified that she would. And in the distance, through the mist and the downpour, a familiar neon sign flickered to life, painting the wet street in shades of red and blue. The Willowridge Diner. Avery knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that someone was inside, waiting for her. Someone who knew what really happened to Jonah Blake. And they were ready to talk. Thanks for watching. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next.